Senator Tillis is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here. I think you've done a good job. I've been here for most of it, the session, except for about 20 minutes I watched on television back in my office. I was Googling earlier, actually going on my Facebook app on my phone earlier, and I found one of your Facebook page, one of your Facebook presences. It was the same one on March 30th. I think you posted a pic of First Seder. But further down, you listed out the facts since the new platform was released in 2007, sort of a timeline. You start with 2007, then you jump to the Cambridge Analytica issue. I actually think that we need to fully examine what Cambridge Analytica did. They either broke a kind of code of conduct. If they broke any other rules or agreements with you all, I hope that they suffer the consequences. But I think that timeline needs to be updated. And it really needs to go back. I've read a series of 3 articles that were published in the MIT Technology Review back in 2012. And it talks about how proud the Obama campaign was of exploiting data on Facebook in the 2012 campaign. In fact, somebody asked you earlier if it made you mad about what Cambridge Analytica did, and you rightfully answered yes. But I think you should probably be equally mad when a former campaign director of the Obama campaign proudly tweeted, "Facebook was surprised we were able to suck out the whole social graph. But they didn't stop us once they realized that was what we were doing." So you clearly had some people in your employ that apparently knew it. At least that's what this person said on Twitter, and thank goodness for Wayback and some of the other history grabber machines. I'm sure we can get this tweet back and get it in the right context. I think when you do your research, it's important to get the whole view. I've worked in data analytics practice for a good part of my career. And for anybody to pretend that Cambridge Analytica was the first person to exploit data clearly doesn't work or hasn't worked in the data analytics field. So when you go back and do your research on Cambridge Analytica, I would personally appreciate it if you'd start back from the first known high-profile national campaign that exploited Facebook data. In fact, they published an app that said it would grab information about my friends, their birth dates, locations, and likes. So presumably, if I downloaded that app that was published by the Obama campaign, I've got 4,900 friends on my Facebook page. I delete the haters and save room for family members and true friends on my personal page, as I'm sure everybody does. Then that means if I clicked yes on that app, I would have approved the access of birth dates, locations, and likes of some 4,900 people without their consent. So as you do the chronology, I think it'd be very helpful so that we can take away the partisan rhetoric that's going on, like this is a Republican-only issue. It's a broad-based issue that needs to be fixed. And bad actors at either end of the political spectrum need to be held accountable, and I trust that you all are going to work on that. I think the one thing so for that, I just want to get to the facts, and there's no way you can answer any of the questions. I'm not going to burden you with that. But I think getting that chronology would be very helpful. The one thing I would encourage people to do is go to Facebook. I'm a proud member of Facebook. Just got a post from my sister on this being National Sibling Day, so I've connected with 4 or 5 of my staff while I was giving you my family undivided attention. But go to the privacy tab. If you don't want to share something, don't share it. This is a free service. Go on there and say, I don't want to allow third-party search engines to get to my Facebook page. Go on there and say, only my friends can look at it. Go in there and understand what you're signing up for. It's a free app. Now, you need to do more, and I think it would be helpful. I didn't read your disclaimer page or the terms of use because I didn't see anywhere in there that I could get an attorney and negotiate the terms, so it was a terms of use. I went on there, then I used the privacy settings to be as safe as I could be with a presence on Facebook. Last thing, we talk about all this proposed legislation, good ideas, but I have one question for you. When you were developing this app in your dorm, how many people did you have in your regulatory affairs division? Exactly. So if government takes a heavy-handed approach to fix this problem, then we know very well that the next Facebook, the next thing that you're going to wake up and worry about how you continue to be relevant as the behemoth that you are today is probably not going to happen. So I think that there's probably a place for some regulatory guidance here, but there's a huge place for Google, Snapchat, Twitter, all the other social media platforms to get together and create standards. And I also believe that that person who may have looked the other way when the whole social graph was extracted for the Obama campaign, if they're still working for you, they probably shouldn't or at least there should be a business code of conduct that says you don't play favorites. You're trying to create a fair place for people to share their ideas. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Harris.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I've been here for on and off for the last 4 hours that you've been testifying, and I have to tell you, I'm concerned about how much Facebook values trust and transparency. If we agree that a critical component of a relationship of trust and transparency is we speak truth and we get to the truth. During the course of this hearing, these last 4 hours, you've been asked several critical questions for which you don't have answers. And those questions have included whether Facebook can track users' browsing activity even after the user has logged off of Facebook, whether Facebook can track your activity across devices even when you aren't logged into Facebook, who is Facebook's biggest competition, whether Facebook may store up to 96 categories of users' information, whether you knew whether Kogan's terms of service and whether you knew if that Kogan could sell or transfer data. And then another case in point, specifically as it relates to Cambridge Analytica, is, and a concern of mine, is that you, meaning Facebook, and I'm going to assume you personally as CEO, became aware in December of 2015 that Dr. Kogan and Cambridge Analytica misappropriated data from 87 million Facebook users. That's 27 months ago that you became, as Facebook, and perhaps you personally became aware. However, a decision was made not to notify the users. So my question is, did anyone at Facebook have a conversation at the time that you became aware of this breach, and have a conversation wherein the decision was made not to contact the users?
Senator, I don't know if there were any conversations at Facebook overall, because I wasn't in a lot of them, but...
on that subject?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what other people discussed. At the time, in 2015, we heard the report that this developer, Alexander Kogan, had sold data to Cambridge Analytica. That's in violation of our terms.
Correct. And were you a part of a decision? Were you part of a discussion that resulted in a decision not to inform your users?
I don't remember a conversation like that. But the reason why...
Are you aware of anyone in leadership at Facebook who was in a conversation where a decision was made not to inform your users, or do you believe no such conversation ever took place?
I'm not sure whether there was a conversation about that, but I can tell you the thought process at the time of the company, which was that in 2015, when we heard about this, we banned the developer, and we demanded that they delete all the data and stop using it, and same with Cambridge Analytica.
They told us they had testimony in that regard, but I'm talking about notification of the users. And this relates to the issue of transparency and the relationship of trust, informing the user about what you know in terms of how their personal information has been misused. And I'm also concerned that when you personally became aware of this, did you or senior leadership do an inquiry to find out who at Facebook had this information, and did they not have a discussion about whether or not the users should be informed back in December of 2015?
Senator, in retrospect, I think we clearly view it as a mistake that we didn't inform people, and we did that based on false information that we thought that the case was closed and that the data had been deleted.
So there was a decision made on that basis not to inform the users, is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. And
but in retrospect, I think that was a mistake, and knowing what we know now, we should have handled a lot of things here differently.
And I appreciate that point. Do you know when that decision was made not to inform the users?
I don't.
Okay. Last November, the Senate Intelligence Committee held a hearing on social media influence. I was a part of that hearing. I submitted 50 written questions to Facebook and other companies, and the responses that we received were unfortunately evasive, and some were frankly non-responsive. So I'm going to ask the question again here. How much revenue did Facebook earn from the user engagement that resulted from foreign propaganda?
Well, Senator, what we do know is that the IRA, the Internet Research Agency, the Russian firm, ran about $100,000 worth of ads.
How
I
much
can't
did
say
Facebook-
that we've identified all of the foreign actors who are involved here, so I can't say that that's all of the money, but that is what we have identified.
Okay, my time is up. I'll submit more questions for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Next up is Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Zuckerberg, I come in peace. I don't want to vote to have to regulate Facebook, but by God, I will. But a lot of that depends on you. I'm a little disappointed in this hearing today. I just don't feel like that we're connecting. So let me try to lay it out for you from my point of view. I think you're a really smart guy. And I think you have built an extraordinary American company. And you've done a lot of good. Some of the things that you've been able to do are magical. But our promised digital utopia, we have discovered, has minefields. There's some impurities in the Facebook punch bowl. And they got to be fixed. And I think you can fix them. Now, here's what's going to happen. There are going to be a whole bunch of bills introduced to regulate Facebook. It's up to you whether they pass or not. You can go back home, spend $10 million on lobbyists and fight us, or you can go back home and help us solve this problem. And there are two. One's a privacy problem. The other one is what I call a propaganda problem. Let's start with the privacy problem first. Let's start with the user agreement. Here's what everybody's been trying to tell you today, and I say this gently. Your user agreement sucks. You can spot me 75 IQ points. If I can figure it out, you can figure it out. The purpose of that user agreement is to cover Facebook's rear end. It's not to inform your users about their rights. Now, you know that, and I know that. I'm going to suggest to you that you go back home and rewrite it. And tell your $1,200 an hour lawyers, no disrespect, they're good. But tell them you want it written in English, in non-Swahili, so the average American can understand it. That would be a start. Are you willing, as a Facebook user, are you willing to give me more control over my data?
Senator, as someone who uses Facebook, I believe that you should have complete control over your data.
Okay. Are you willing to go back and work on giving me a greater right to erase my data?
Senator, you can already delete any of the data that's there or delete all of your data.
Are you willing to expand that, work on expanding that?
Senator, I think we already do what you're referring to, but certainly we're always working on trying to make these controls easier.
Are you willing to expand my right to know who you're sharing my data with?
Senator, we already give you a list of apps that you're using, and you signed into those yourself and provided affirmative consent.
Right.
As I've said before, we don't share any data with...
On that user agreement. Are you willing to expand my right to prohibit you from sharing my data?
Senator, again, I believe that you already have that control. So, I mean, I think people have that full control in the system already today. If we're not communicating this clearly, then that's a big thing that we should work on, because I think the principles that you're articulating are the ones that we believe in and try to codify in the product that we build.
Are you willing to give me the right to take my data on Facebook and move it to another social media platform?
Senator, you can already do that. We have a download your information tool where you can go get a file of all the content there, and then do whatever you want with it.
And then I assume you're willing to give me the right to say, I'm going to go on your platform, and you're going to be able to tell a lot about me as a result, but I don't want you to share it with anybody.
Yes, Senator, and I believe you already have that ability today. People can sign on and choose to not share things and just follow some friends or some pages and read content if that's what they want to do.
Okay. Let me be sure I understand. I'm about out of time. Boy, it goes fast, doesn't it? Let me ask you one final question in my 12 seconds. Could somebody call you up and say, I want to see John Kennedy's file?
Absolutely not.
Could you, if it, not could you, not would you do it, could you do it?
In theory.
Do you have the right to put my data, a name on my data, and share it with somebody?
I do not believe we have the right to do that.
Do you have the ability?
Senator, the data is in the system,
Do
so
you have the ability?
technically I think someone could do that, but that would be a massive breach. So we would never do that.
It would be a breach. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Baldwin's up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here and enduring a long day, Mr. Zuckerberg. I want to start with what I hope can be a quick round of questions, just so I make sure I understand your previous testimony. Specifically with regard to the process by which Cambridge Analytica was able to purchase Facebook users' data. So it was an app developer, Alexander Kogan. He collected data via a personality quiz. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he thereby is able to gain access of not only the people who took the quiz, but their network. Is that correct, too?
Senator, yes, the terms of the platform at the time allowed for people to share their information and some basic information about their friends as well. And we've since changed that. As of 2014, now that's not possible.
And so in total, about 87 million Facebook users. You earlier testified about the two types of ways you gain data. One is what is voluntarily shared by Facebook members and users, and the other is in order to, I think you said, improve your advertising experience, whatever that exactly means, the data that Facebook collects in order to customize or focus on that. Was Alexander Kogan able to get both of those sets of data, or just what was voluntarily entered by the user?
Yes, that's a good question. It was just a subset of what was entered by the person. And
so a subset of the 95 categories of data that you keep?
yes, when you sign into
Okay.
an app, the app developer has to say, here are the types of data that from you that I'm asking for, including public information like your name and profile, the pages you follow, other interests on your profile, that kind of content.
Okay.
The app developer has to disclose that up front, and you agree to it.
Okay. So in answer to a couple of other senators' questions, specifically Senator Fisher, you talked about Facebook storing this data, and I think you just talked about the data being in the system. I wonder if outside of the way in which Alexander Kogan was able to access this data, whether could Facebook be vulnerable to a data breach or hack? Why or why not?
Well, there are many kinds of security threats that a company like ours faces, including people trying to break into our security systems.
Okay. And if you believe that you had been hacked, do you believe you would have the duty to inform those who were impacted?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know whether Alexander Kogan sold any of the data he collected with anyone other than Cambridge Analytica?
Senator, yes, we do. He sold it to a couple of other firms.
Can you identify them?
Yes, there's one called Unoya, and there may have been a couple of others as well. And
Can
I
you
can
furnish
follow
that
up
to
with
me
you.
after? Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that. And then, how much do you know, or have you tried to find out, how Cambridge Analytica used the data while they had it before you believe they deleted it?
Since we just heard that they didn't delete it about a month ago, we've kicked off an internal investigation to see if they used that data in any of their ads, for example. That investigation is still underway, and we can come back to you with the results of that once we have that.
Okay. I want to switch to my home state of Wisconsin. According to press reports, my home state of Wisconsin was a major target of Russian-bought ads on Facebook in the 2016 election. These divisive ads, touching on a number of very polarizing issues, were designed to interfere with our election. We've also learned that Russian actors using another platform, Twitter, similarly targeted Wisconsin with divisive content aimed at sowing division and dissent, including in the wake of a police-involved shooting in Milwaukee's Sherman Park neighborhood in August of 2016. Now, I find some encouragement in the steps you've outlined today to provide greater transparency regarding political ads. I do want to get further information on how you can be confident that you have excluded entities based outside of the United States.
We will follow up on that.
And then I think on that topic, if you require disclosure of a political ads sponsor, what sort of transparency will you be able to provide with regard to people who weren't the subject of that ad seeing its content?
Senator, you'll be able to go to any page and see all of the ads that that page has run. So if someone is running a political campaign, for example, and they're targeting one district with one ad and another district with another, historically, it's been hard to track that down, but now it'll be very easy. You'll just be able to look at all of the ads that they've run, the targeting associated with each to see what they're saying to different folks, and in some cases, how much they're spending on the ads, and all of the relevant information. This is an area where I think more transparency will really help discourse overall and root out foreign interference in elections.
Thank you,
And will
Senator
you-
Baldwin. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for testifying here today. Do you have any idea how many of your users actually read the terms of service, the privacy policy, the statement of rights and responsibilities? I mean, actually read it?
Senator, I do not.
Would you imagine it's a very small percentage?
Senator, who read the whole thing? I would imagine that probably most people do not read the whole thing, but everyone has the opportunity to and consents to it.
Well, I agree, but that's kind of true of every application where you want to get to it and you have to agree to it and people just press that agree. The vast majority, correct?
Senator, it's really hard for me to make a full assessment, but
Common sense would tell you that'd be probably the case. With all this publicity, have you documented any kind of backlash from Facebook users? I mean, has there been a dramatic fall off in the number of people who utilize Facebook because of these concerns?
Senator, there has not.
You haven't even witnessed any?
Senator, there was a movement where some people were encouraging their friends to delete their account, and I think that got shared a bunch.
So it's kind of safe to say that Facebook users don't seem to be overly concerned about all these revelations, although obviously Congress apparently is.
Well, Senator, I think people are concerned about it, and I think these are incredibly important issues that people want us to address, and I think people have told us that very clearly.
But it seems like Facebook users still want to use the platform because they enjoy sharing photos and they share the connectivity with their family members, that type of thing, and that overrides their concerns about privacy. You talk about the user owns the data. There have been a number of proposals of having that data stay with the user and allow the user to monetize it themselves. Your COO, Ms. Sandberg, mentioned possibly if you can't utilize that data to sell advertising, perhaps we'd charge people to go onto Facebook. Have you thought about that model where the user data is actually monetized by the actual user?
Senator, I'm not sure exactly how it would work for it to be monetized by the person directly. In general, where we believe that the ads model is the right one for us because it aligns with our social mission of trying to connect everyone and bring the world closer together.
But you're aware of people making that kind of proposal, correct?
Yeah, Senator, a number of people suggest that we should offer a version where people can not have ads if they pay a monthly subscription, and certainly we consider ideas like that. I think that they're reasonable ideas to think through. But overall, I think that the ads experience is going to be the best one. I think in general, people like not having to pay for a service. A lot of people can't afford to pay for a service around the world, and this aligns with our mission the best.
You answered Senator Graham when he asked you if you thought you were a monopoly, that you didn't think so. You're obviously a big player in this space. That might be an area for competition, correct? If somebody else wants to create a social platform that allows a user to monetize their own data.
Senator, yes. There are lots of new social apps all the time, and as I said before, the average American, I think, uses 8 different communication and social apps. So there's a lot of different choice and a lot of innovation and activity going on in this space.
I want, in a very short period of time here, talk about the difference between advertisers and application developers, because those, again, you said in an earlier testimony that advertisers have no access to data whatsoever. But application developers do. Now, is that only through their own service agreements with their customers, or do they actually access data as they're developing applications?
Senator, this is an important distinction, so thanks for giving me the opportunity to clarify this. We give people the ability to take their data to another app if they want. And this is a question that Senator Kennedy asked me just a few minutes ago. The reason why we designed the platform that way is because we thought it would be very useful to make it so that people could easily bring their data to other services. Some people inside the company argued against that at the time because they were worried that they said, hey, we should just make it so that we can be the only ones who develop this stuff.
Again,
but we thought that was a useful thing for people to do.
That's the user agreeing to allow you to share, when they're using that app to allow Facebook to share data. Does the developer ever have access to that prior to users using it? I mean, in developing the application, because you use the term scraped data. What does that mean? Who scraped the data?
Yes, Senator, this is a good question. So there's the developer platform, which is the sanctioned way that an app developer can ask a person to access information. We also have certain features and certain things that are public, right? A lot of the information that people choose to put on Facebook, they're sharing with everyone in the world, not privately, but you put your name, you put your profile picture. That's public information that people put out there. And sometimes people who aren't registered developers of Facebook try to load a lot of pages in order to get access to a bunch of people's public information and aggregate it. We fight back hard against that because we don't want anyone to aggregate information, even if people made it public and chose to share it with everyone.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here today. I want to talk to a couple of broader issues. I'm concerned that Facebook's profitability rests on 2 potentially problematic foundations, and we've heard other senators talk about this a little today. The foundations are maximizing the amount of time people spend on your products and collecting people's data. I've looked at Facebook's 2017 corporate financial statement where you lay out some of the major risks to your business. One risk is a decrease in, and I quote, user engagement, including time spent on our products. That concerns me because of the research we've seen suggesting that too much time spent on social media can hurt people's mental health, especially young people. Another major risk to your business is a potential decline in, and here's another quote, the effectiveness of our ad targeting or the degree to which users opt out of certain types of ad targeting, including as a result of changes that enhance the user's privacy. There's clearly tension, as other senators have pointed out, between your bottom line and what's best for your users. You've said in your testimony that Facebook's mission is to bring the world closer together, and you've said that you will never prioritize advertisers over that mission, and I believe that you believe that. But at the end of the day, your business model does prioritize advertisers over the mission. Facebook is a for-profit company, and as a CEO, you have a legal duty to do what's best for your shareholders. So given all of that, why should we think that Facebook on its own will ever truly be able to make the changes that we need it to make to protect Americans' well-being and privacy?
Well, Senator, you raise a number of important points in there, so let me respond in
Sure.
a couple of different ways. The first is that I think it's really important to think about what we're doing as building this community over the long term. Any business has the opportunity to do things that might increase revenue in the short term, but at the expense of trust or building engagement over time. What we actually find is not necessarily that increasing time spent, especially not just in the short term, is going to be best for our business. It aligns very closely with the well-being research that we've done. That when people are interacting with other people and posting and basically building relationships, that is both correlated with higher measures of well-being, health, happiness, not feeling lonely, and that ends up being better for the business than when they're doing lower value things like just passively consuming content. So I think that's an important point to.
Okay, and I understand the point that you're trying to make here, but here's what I'm concerned about. We have heard this point from you over the last decade plus. Since you founded Facebook, and I understand it, you founded it pretty much as a solo entrepreneur with your roommate, but now, you're sitting here at the head of a bazillion-dollar company, and we've heard you apologize numerous times and promise to change, but here we are again, right? So I really firmly believe in free enterprise, but when private companies are unwilling or unable to do what's necessary, public officials have historically, in every industry, stepped up to protect our constituents and consumers. You've supported targeted regulations such as the Honest Ads Act, and that's an important step for election integrity. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of that bill. But we need to address other broader issues as well. And today you've said you'd be open to some regulation, but this has been a pretty general conversation. So will you commit to working with Congress to develop ways of protecting constituent privacy and well-being, even if it means that results in some laws that will require you to adjust your business model?
Senator, yes, we will commit to that. I think that's an important conversation to have. Our position is not that regulation is bad. I think the internet is so important in people's lives, and it's getting more important.
Yep.
The expectations on internet companies and technology companies overall are growing. And I think the real question is, what is the right framework for this, not should there be one?
That is very helpful. And I think the other question, and it doesn't just go to Facebook, is whether the framework should include financial penalties when large providers like Facebook are breached and privacy is compromised as a result. Because right now there is very little incentive for whether it's Facebook or Equifax to actually be aggressive in protecting customer privacy and looking for potential breaches or vulnerabilities in their system. So what we hear after the fact, after people's privacy has been breached, after they've taken the harm that comes with that and considerable inconvenience in addition to the harm, we've heard apologies, but there is no financial incentive right now, it seems to me, for these companies to aggressively stand in their consumers' stead and protect their privacy. And I would really look forward to working with you on that and getting your considered opinion about it.
Well, Senator, we look forward to discussing that with you. I would disagree, however, that we have no financial incentive or incentive overall to do this. This episode has clearly hurt us and has clearly made it harder for us to achieve the social mission that we care about. And we now have to do a lot of work around building trust back, which is just a really important part of this.
Well, I thank you. My time is up, and I'll follow up with you on that.
Senator Capito.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here today. I want to ask just kind of a process question. You've said more than a few times that Facebook users can delete from their own account at any time. Well, we know in the course I do, I've got grandchildren now, but children, you tell your children, once you make that mark in cyber or in the internet system, it never really goes away. So my question to you is, if once and I think you answered that once an individual deletes the information from their page, it's gone forever from Facebook's archives. Is that correct?
Yes. And I think you raise a good point, though, which is that we will delete it from our systems, but if you've shared something to someone else, then we can't guarantee that they don't have it somewhere else.
Okay, so if somebody leaves Facebook and then rejoins and asks Facebook, can you recreate my past? Your answer would be?
If they delete their account, the answer is no. That's why we actually offer two options. We offer deactivation, which allows you to shut down or suspend your account but not delete the information, because actually a lot of people want to, at least for some period of time, I mean, we hear students with exams coming up want to not be on Facebook because they want to make sure that they can focus on the exam. So they deactivate their account temporarily, but then want the ability to turn it back on when they're ready. You can also delete your account, which is wiping everything. And if you do that, then you can't get it back.
You can't get it back. It's gone from your archives.
Yes.
But is it ever really gone?
From our systems, it is.
From the cloud or wherever it is. I mean, it always seems to be able to reappear in investigations and other things, not necessarily Facebook, but other emails and other things of that nature. What about the information going from the past, the information that's already been in the Cambridge Analytica case? You can't really go back and redo that. So I'm going to assume that what we've been talking with and the improvements that you're making now at Facebook are from this point forward. Is that a correct assumption?
Senator, I actually do think we can go back in some cases. And that's why one of the things that I announced is that we're going to be investigating every single app that had access to a large amount of information before we locked down the platform in 2014. And if we find any pattern of suspicious activity, then we're going to go do a full audit of their systems. And if we find that anyone's improperly using data, then we'll take action to make sure that they delete the data, and we'll inform everyone who may have had their data misused.
Okay, the other suggestion I would make, because we're kind of running out of time here, is you've heard more than a few complaints, and I joined the chorus of the lapse in the time of when you discovered and when you became transparent. And I understand you sent out 2 messages just today to users. So I would say you regret that decision, that you wish you'd been more transparent at the time. So I would imagine if in the course of your investigation you find more breaches, so to speak, that you will be re-informing your Facebook customers.
Yes, that is correct. We have already committed that if we find any improper use, we will inform everyone affected.
Okay, thank you. You've said also that you want to have an active view on controlling your ecosystem. Last week, the FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb addressed a drug summit in Atlanta and spoke on the national opioid epidemic. My state, I'm from West Virginia. And thank you for visiting. And next time you visit, if you would please bring some fiber, because we don't have connectivity in our rural areas like we really need, and Facebook could really help us with that. So Commissioner Gottlieb called upon social media and internet service providers, and he mentioned Facebook when he talked about it, to try to disrupt the sale of illegal drugs, and particularly powerful opioid fentanyl, which has been advertised and sold online. I know you have policies against this. The commissioner is announcing his intention to convene a meeting of chief executives and senior leaders, and I want to know, can I get a commitment from you today that Facebook will commit to having a representative with Commissioner Gottlieb to finalize with this meeting?
Senator, that sounds like an important initiative, and we will send someone.
Okay,
and let me also say that on your point about connectivity, we do have a group at Facebook that is working on trying to spread internet connectivity in rural areas, and we would be happy to follow up with you on that as well. That's something that I'm very passionate about.
That's good. That's good news. Last question I have, just on the advertising. If somebody advertises on Facebook and somebody purchases something, does Facebook get a percentage or any kind of a fee associated with a successful purchase from an advertiser?
Senator, no. The way that the system works is advertisers bid how much it's worth it to them to show an ad or when an action happens. So it's not that we would get a percent of the sale, but let's just use an example. So let's say you're an app developer, and your goal is you want to get more people to install your app. You could bid in the ad system and say, I will pay $3 anytime someone installs this app. And then we basically calculate on our side which ads are going to be relevant for people. And we have an incentive to show people ads that are going to be relevant because we only get paid when it delivers a business result. And that's how the system works.
So it could be you could be paid for the for the sale.
We get paid when the action that the advertiser wants to happen happens.
All right, thank you.
Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Mr. Zuckerberg, thank you. Been a long afternoon, and I appreciate you being here and taking the time with every single one of us. I'm going to echo a lot of what I've heard my colleagues say today as well. Appreciate you being here, appreciate the apology, but stop apologizing and let's make the change. I think it's time to really change the conduct. I appreciate the fact that you talked about your principles for Facebook. Notice to users on the use of the data, and that users have complete control of their data. But the skepticism that I have, and I'm hoping you can help me with this, is over the last, 7 years, haven't seen really much change in ensuring that the privacy is there and that individual users have control over their data. So let me ask you this. Back in 2009, you made 2 changes to your privacy policy. And in fact, prior to that, most users could either identify only friends or friends of friends as part of their privacy, correct? If they wanted to protect their data, they could identify only friends or friends of friends who could see their data. Isn't that correct?
Senator, I believe that we've had the option for people to share with friends, friends of friends, a custom audience, or publicly for a long time.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly when we put that in place, but I believe it was before 2009.
So either you can choose only friends or friends of friends to decide how you're going to share that, protect that data, correct?
Those are 2 of the options, yes.
Okay. And in 2011, when the FTC started taking a look at this, they were concerned that if somebody chose only friends, the individual user was under the impression they could continue to restrict sharing of data to limited audience, but that wasn't the case. And in fact, selecting friends only did not prevent users' information from being shared with third-party applications their friend used. Isn't that the case? And that's why the FTC was looking at you and making that change, because there was concern that if you had friends on your page, a third party could access that information. Isn't that correct?
Senator, I don't remember the exact context that the...
So let me help you here, because David Vladeck, who was spent nearly 4 years as director of the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Consumer Protection, where he worked, including on the FTC's enforcement case against Facebook, basically identifies in this article that that was the case, that not only did Facebook misrepresent, and that's why there were 8 counts of deceptive acts and practices, the actual FTC in November's 2011 decree basically required Facebook to give users clear and conspicuous notice and to obtain affirmative, jump back here, to do 3 things. The decree barred Facebook from making any further deceptive privacy claims, and it required Facebook get consumers' approval before changing the way it shares their data. And most importantly, the third thing, it required Facebook to give users clear and conspicuous notice and to obtain affirmative express consent before sharing their data with third parties. That was part of the FTC consent decree, correct?
Senator, that sounds right to me.
Okay, so at that time, you were on notice that there were concerns about the sharing of data and information, users' data, including those friends with third parties, correct?
Senator, my understanding...
Well, let me ask you this. Let me do it this way. In response to the FTC consent to make those changes, did you make those changes, and what did you do to ensure individuals' user data was protected and they had notice of that information and that potentially third parties would be accessing that and they had to give express consent? What did you specifically do in response to that?
Senator, a number of things. One of the most important parts of the FTC consent decree that we signed was establishing a robust privacy program at the company headed by our Chief Privacy Officer, Erin Egan.
Can you
We're
give me
now-
specifics? And I know, and I've heard this over and over again, and I'm running out of time. But here's the concern that I have. It can't be a privacy policy because that's what the consent said it couldn't be. It had to be something very specific, something very simple, like you've heard from my colleagues. And that did not occur. Had that occurred, we wouldn't be here today talking about Cambridge Analytica. Isn't that really true? Had you addressed those issues then, had you done an audit, had you looked at not only the third-party applications, but audited their associated data storage as well, you would have known that this type of data information was being shared. And that's our concern, and that's what I'm saying now. Time just to make the change. It's time to really address the privacy issue. It's time to really come and lead the country on this issue and how we can protect individual users' data and information. I know my time is running out, but I appreciate you being here, and I'm just hoping that you're committed to working with us in the future and addressing these concerns.
Thank you, Senator Cortez Masto. Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for your patience and testimony today. The end is near. I think 1, 2, 3, or 4 people, so that's good news to get out of this hearing. A couple questions for you. To clarify one of the comments made about deleting accounts from Facebook. In the user agreement, it says when you delete IP content, if it is deleted in a manner similar to emptying the recycle bin on a computer. However, you understand that removed content may persist in backup copies for a reasonable period of time. How long is that?
Senator, I don't know sitting here what our current systems are on that, but the intent is to get all the content out of the system as quickly as possible.
And does that mean your user data as well? It talks about IP content. Is that the same thing as your user data? It could sit in backup copies?
Senator, I think that is probably right. I'm not sitting here today having full knowledge of our current state of the systems around wiping all of the data out of backups, so I can follow up with you on that afterwards. But what I can tell you is that
all backups get wiped.
That is certainly the way it's supposed to work.
Has there ever been a failure of that?
Senator, I don't know. If we tell people that we're going to delete their data, we need to do that.
And you do that. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg. A couple of other questions. I think that gets to the heart of this expectation gap, as I call it, with users. Facebook, as I understand it, if you're logged into Facebook with a separate browser and you log into another article, open a new tab in the browser, well, you have the Facebook tab open, and that new tab has a Facebook button on it. You track the article that you're reading. Is that correct?
Senator, I think that there is functionality like that, yes.
Do you think users understand that?
Senator, I think that there is a reasonable, I think the answer is probably yes for the following reason. Because when we show a like button on a website, we show social context there. So it says, here are your friends who liked that. So in order to do that, we would have to.
But if you've got your Facebook browser open and you open up the article in the Denver Post and it has a Facebook button on it, you think they know, consumers, users know, that Facebook now knows what article you were reading in the Denver Post?
Well, we would need to have that in order to serve up the like button and show you who your friends were who would also like that.
So I think that goes to the heart of this expectation gap, because I don't think consumers, users necessarily understand that. I mean, and going through this user agreement, as others have, you do need a lawyer to understand it. And I hope that you can close that expectation gap by simplifying the user agreement, making sure that people understand their privacy. Has there ever been a violation outside of the talk about Cambridge Analytica about the privacy settings? Has a privacy setting violation ever occurred outside of Cambridge Analytica?
I'm not aware that we have had systems that have.
So the privacy
shown
setting
content.
a user uses have always been respected. There's never been an instance where those privacy settings have been violated.
That's my understanding. I mean, this is the core thing that our company does. Is you come to Facebook, you say, "Hey, I want to share this photo, or I want to send this message to these people."
Has there ever been
we have to?
Has there ever been a breach of Facebook data? A hack?
There have been. I don't believe that there has been a breach of data that we are aware of.
Has there ever been a hack?
Yes.
And have those hacks accessed user data?
I don't believe so. I think we had an instance back in 2013 where someone was able to install some malware on a few employees' computers and had access to some of the content on their computers, but I don't believe that they had access to data.
Page. Never affected the user page?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Has the government ever asked to remove a page, have a page removed?
Senator, I believe so.
Okay. And has the government ever, can you get a warrant to join a page, to be on a page, pretending you're a separate user, to be liked by that, to track what that person's doing? Do you need a warrant for that, or can the government just do that, the FBI, anybody?
Senator, I'm not sure I fully understand. You're saying to...
We can follow up on that, because I do want to have one final question I want to ask you. A couple days ago, I think Facebook talked about that it would label traditional advocacy as political ads. And for instance, if the Sierra Club was to run a climate change ad, that would be labeled political ad. If the Chamber of Commerce wanted to run or place an ad as this would have an impact on the climate change regulations would have an impact, and to talk about that through an ad, that would be labeled as political, which is different than current standards of what is political, what is issue advocacy. Is it your intent to label things political that would be in contradiction to federal law?
Senator, the intent of what we're trying to get at is the foreign election interference that we've seen has taken more the form of issue ads than direct political electioneering advertising. So because of that, we think it's very important to extend the verification and transparency to issue ads in order to block the kind of interference that the Russians attempted to do and I think will likely continue to attempt to do. That's why I think that those measures are important to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Garner. Senator Tester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for being here today, Mark. I appreciate you coming in. I hope this isn't the last time we see you in front of committee. I know we're approaching 5 hours, so it's been a little tenuous, some mental gymnastics for all of us, and I just want to thank you for being here. Facebook is an American company, and with that, I believe you've got a responsibility to protect American liberties, central to our privacy. Facebook allowed a foreign company to steal private information. They allowed a foreign company to steal private information from tens of millions of Americans, largely without any knowledge of their own. Who and how we choose to share our opinions is a question of personal freedom. Who we share our likes and dislikes with is a question of personal freedom. This is a troubling episode that completely shatters that liberty, so that you understand the magnitude of this. Montanans deeply concerned, they are deeply concerned with this breach of privacy and trust. So you've been at this for nearly 5 hours today. So besides taking reactive steps, and I want you to be as concise as you possibly can, what are you doing to make sure what Cambridge Analytica did never happens again?
Thank you, Senator. There are 3 important steps that we're taking here. For Cambridge Analytica, first of all, we need to finish resolving this by doing a full audit of their systems to make sure that they delete all the data that they have, and so we can fully understand what happened. There are 2 sets of steps that we're taking to make sure that this doesn't happen again. The most important is restricting the amount of access to information that developers will have going forward. The good news here is that back in 2014, we actually had already made a large change to restrict access on the platform that would have prevented this issue with Cambridge Analytica from happening again today. Clearly, we did not do that soon enough. If we'd done it a couple of years earlier, then we probably wouldn't be sitting here today. But this isn't a change that we had to take now in 2018. It's largely a change that we made back in 2014.
Okay.
There are other parts of the platform that we also similarly can lock down now to make sure that other issues that might have been exploited in the future won't be able to. And we've taken a number of those steps, and I've outlined those in my written statement as well.
I appreciate that, and you feel confident that the actions you've taken thus far, whether it was the ones back in 2014 or the one that you just talked about locking down the other parts, will adequately protect the folks who use Facebook?
Senator, I believe so.
Okay.
Although security is never a solved problem.
That's all I need. You talked about a full audit of Cambridge Analytica systems. Can you do a full audit if that information is stored somewhere, some other country?
Senator, if right now we're waiting on the audit because the UK government is doing a government investigation of them,
Okay, but
and I do believe that the government will have the ability to get into the systems even if we can't.
if information is stored in the UK, but what if it's stored in some other country? What if the information is stored in some other country? Is an audit even possible?
Well, Senator, we believe a bunch of the information that we will be able to audit. I think you raise an important question, and if we have issues, then if we are not able to do an audit to our satisfaction, we are going to take legal action to enable us to do that. And also I know that the UK and US governments are also involved in working on this as well.
I don't really, I'm telling you, I have faith in the U.S. government. I really actually have faith in the U.K. too. There have been claims that this information is being stored in Russia. I don't care. It could be stored anywhere in the world. I don't know how you get access to that information. I'm not as smart as you are about tech information. And so the question really becomes, and I got to move on, but the question is, I don't see how you can perform a full audit if they've got stuff stored somewhere else that we can't get access to. That's all. Maybe you have other ideas on how to do that.
Well, I think we'll know once we get in there whether we feel like we can fully investigate everything.
Just real quickly, Senator Schatz asked a question earlier about data and who owns the data. I want to dig into it a little bit more. You said, and I think multiple times during this hearing, that I own the data on Facebook if it's my data.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you that I think that sounds really good to me. But in practice, let's think about this for a second. You're making about $40 billion a year on the data. I'm not making any money on it. It feels like you own the data. And in fact, I would say that the data that was breached through Cambridge Analytica, which impacted, and correct me if these numbers are wrong, some 80 million Americans, my guess is that few, if any, knew that that information was being breached. If I own that data, I know it's being breached. So could you give me some sort of idea on how you can really honestly say it's my data when, quite frankly, they may have goods on me. I don't want them to have any information on me.
Senator, when I say
if I own it, I can stop it.
Yes. So, Senator, when I say it's your data, what we mean is that you have control over how it's used on Facebook. You clearly need to give Facebook a license to use it within our system, or else the service doesn't work.
Yeah, I know, and this license has been brought up many times today, and I'm going to be quiet in just 1 second, Mr. Chairman. But the fact is the license is very thick, maybe intentionally so people get tired of reading it and don't want to. Look, Mark, I appreciate you being here. I look forward to having you at another hearing. Thank you.
Senator Young.
Mr. Zuckerberg, thanks so much for being here and enduring the many questions today. I think it's important you're here because your social media platform happens to be the ubiquitous social media platform, and there's not a senator that you heard from today that isn't on Facebook, that doesn't communicate with our constituents through Facebook. In a sense, we have to be on it. And so I think it's especially important that you're here, not just for Facebook, but really for our country and beyond. The threshold question that continues to emerge here today is what are the reasonable expectations of privacy that users ought to have? And I'll tell you, my neighbors are unsatisfied by an answer to that question that involves, take a look at the user agreement. And I think there's been a fair amount of discussion here about whether or not people actually read that user agreement. I would encourage you to, survey that, get all the information you can with respect to that, and make sure that user agreement is easy to understand and streamlined and so forth. Mr. Zuckerberg, earlier in today's hearing, you drew a distinction that I thought was interesting. It caught my attention. It was a distinction between consumer expectation of privacy, depending upon whether they were on an ISP, or the pipes of the Internet, as you characterized it, or on an edge platform like Facebook. I find this distinction somewhat unsatisfying because most folks who use the internet just think of it as one place, if you will. They think of it as the internet as opposed to various places requiring different degrees of privacy. Could you speak to this issue and indicate whether you'd support a comprehensive privacy policy that applies in the same manner to all entities across the entire internet ecosystem?
Senator, sure. I think that people's expectations of how they use these different systems are different. Some apps are very lightweight, and and you can fully encrypt the data going across them in a way that the app developer or the pipes in the ISP case probably shouldn't be able to see any of the content, and I think you probably should have a full expectation that no one is going to be introspecting or looking at that content.
Give me some quick examples, if you would, kindly, sir.
Sure. Well, when data is going over the Verizon network, I think it would be good for that to be as encrypted as possible, and such that Verizon wouldn't look at it, right? I think that that's what people expect, and I don't know that being able to look at the data is required to deliver their service. That's how WhatsApp works too. So that's an app. It's a very lightweight app. It doesn't require us to know a lot of information about you, so we can offer that with full encryption, and therefore we're not looking. We don't see the content. For a service like Facebook or Instagram, where you're sharing photos and then people want to access them from lots of different places, people kind of want to store that in a central place, so that way they can go access it from lots of different devices. In order to do that, we need to have an understanding of what that content is. So I think the expectations of what Facebook will have knowledge of versus what an ISP will have knowledge of are just different.
I think that needs to be clearly communicated to your users, and we'll leave it at that. That those different levels of privacy that the user can expect to enjoy when they're on your platform. I'd like to sort of take a different tack to internet privacy policy with you, sir. Might we create stronger privacy rights for consumers, either through creating a stronger general property right regime online, say a new law that states unequivocally, something that you said before, that users own their online data, or through stronger affirmative opt-in requirements on platforms like yours? Now, if we were to do that, would you need to retool your model? If we were to adopt one of those two approaches.
Senator, can you repeat what the approaches are again?
Yeah, so one is to create a stronger property right for the individual online through a law that states unequivocally users own their data. The other one is a stronger affirmative opt-in requirement to be a user on Facebook. Would you have to fundamentally change the Facebook architecture to accommodate those policies?
Senator, those policies and the principles that you articulated are generally how we view our service already. So depending on the details of what the proposal actually ends up being, and the details do just matter a huge amount here, it's not clear that it would be a fundamental shift. But the details really matter, and if this is something you're considering or working on, we would love to follow up with you on this, because this is very important to get right.
I'd love to work with you. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Senator Thune has a closing comment. And I have a process statement for everybody to listen to.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thanks to all of our members for their patience. Been a long hearing, particularly long hearing for you, Mr. Zuckerberg. Thank you for sitting through this, but I think this is important. I do have a letter here from the Motion Picture Association of America that I want to get into the record without objection.
Without objection, so ordered.
And just a quick sort of wrap-up question, if you will, and maybe one quick comment. But you've answered several questions today about efforts to keep bad actors, whether that's a terrorist group to a malicious foreign agent, off of your platform. You've also heard concerns about bias at Facebook, particularly bias against conservatives. And I just, as a final question, can you assure us that when you are improving tools to stop bad actors, that you will err on the side of protecting speech, especially political speech, from all different corners?
Senator, yes, that's our approach. if there is an imminent threat of harm, we're going to take a conservative position on that and make sure that we flag that and understand that more broadly. But overall, I want to make sure that we provide people with the most voice possible. I want the widest possible expression, and I don't want anyone at our company to make any decisions based on the political ideology of the content.
Okay. And just one final observation, Chairman Grassley. Mr. Zuckerberg has answered a lot of questions today, but there are also a lot of promises to follow up with some of our members, and sometimes on questions about Facebook practices that seem fairly straightforward, but I don't think we have. I think it's going to be hard for us to fashion solutions to solve some of this stuff until we have some of those answers. And you had indicated earlier that you're continuing to try and find out who among these other analytics companies may have had access to user data that they were able to use. And hopefully as you get those answers, you will be able to forward those to us, and it'll help shape our thinking in terms of where we go from here. So, but overall, I think it's a very informative hearing, Mr. Chairman, and so I'm ready to wrap it up.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't make this comment, but your response to him in regard to political speech, I won't identify the CEO I had a conversation with yesterday, but one of our platforms, and he admitted to being more left than right, or I mean being left, I guess is what he admitted, and I don't know, I'm not asking you what you are, but but just so you understand that that probably as liberals have a lot of concerns about you know, the leaning of Fox News, or conservatives have questions about the leaning of MSNBC, let's say. It seems to me that when we get, whether it's from the right or the left, so I'm speaking to you for your platform, there's a great deal of cynicism in American society about government generally. And then when there is suspicions, legitimate or not, that maybe you're playing it one way unfairly towards the other, it seemed to me that everything you can do to lean over backwards to make sure that you are fair in protecting political speech, right or left, that you ought to do it. And I'm not telling you how to do it, and I'm not saying you don't do it, but we got to do something to reduce this cynicism. At my town meetings in Iowa, I always get this question: how come you guys in D.C. can't get along? You know, meaning Republicans and Democrats. Well, I try to explain to them that they kind of get a obtuse, what would you say, a review of what goes on here, because controversy makes news. So if people are getting along, you never hear about that. So they get a distorted view of it. And really, we congressmen get along more than the public thinks. But these attitudes of the public, we got to change. And people of your position and your influence, you can do a lot to change this. Whether I know you got plenty of time to run your corporation, through your corporation or privately, anything you can do to reduce this cynicism, because we have a perfect constitution. Maybe it's not perfect, but we got a very good constitution, the longest one written constitution in the history of mankind. But if people don't have faith in the institutions of government, and then it's our responsibility to enhance that faith so they have less cynicism in us. You know, we don't have a very strong democracy just because we got a good constitution. So I hope that everybody will do whatever they can to help enhance respect for government, including speaking to myself. I got to bend over backwards to do what I can so I don't add to that cynicism. So sorry you had to listen to me. So this concludes today's hearing. Thanks to all the witnesses for attending. The record will be open for 14 days for the members to submit additional written questions, and for the witness, Mr. Zuckerberg, to make any corrections to his testimony. The hearing is adjourned.